Meghan Markle's shocking humiliation in Geneva finally proves that she has just gone mad. I mean, this was the moment, Nancy Sidley pointed it out, this was the moment, the major defeat on her face when she realised that no one had bothered to show up for what was a catastrophic speech.
The single woman in the red circle behind Meghan Markle at the Geneva World Health Organization event was not a fan who had come to watch the speech. She was a passerby standing at a bus stop attempting to get home. The image, which the Sussex household's preferred media outlets had presented as evidence of audience presence, has now been forensically analysed by the Independent Commentary Network. The woman is positioned at the location of an active Geneva public transport stop, with the bus stop infrastructure visible behind her in the frame. The other figures, the household and its aligned outlets had attempted to characterise as audience members, were tourists photographing the large chair sculpture that sits at the Geneva conference venue and forms part of the city's standing public art installation. The structural meaning of this analysis is that the Geneva engagement, which the Sussex household had positioned as a substantive international policy intervention, produced operationally no audience at all. The streets were empty. The cars passed without stopping. The pedestrians walked through without registering the engagement. The speech was delivered to staff, media required to be present for work, and an entirely indifferent street environment.
Of course, this does raise a really interesting point. As Resting Dollface said, nobody's there, so why does Meghan Markle need security? There's a street with cars behind her, no crowds, people walking by, not caring. Nobody cares about what Meghan Markle had to say. She posts her own kids online.
This is the central operational reading of the outspoken broadcast hosted by Dan Wootton with Brittany of the Royal News Network this week. And the broadcast develops the analytical framework that places the Geneva failure inside the broader context of the Sussex household's contracting public reception. The structural feature of the engagement is operationally significant because Meghan's Sussex public relations team has consistently deployed the framing that her appearances draw substantial public attention. The Harry interview register, in which he has historically claimed that the British royal family was threatened by Meghan because of the way she drew crowds, depends on the operational reality of crowd-drawing capacity. The Geneva engagement is the empirical test case for this capacity in 2026. The result is operationally definitive. The capacity does not exist at the level the framing requires. The Geneva streets were empty during the speech.
And the timing of this, of course, could not be more mortifying when we compare Meghan's crowds to Catherine's crowds in Italy while I was away last week. And as Meghan's mole put it, I mean, you don't need to comment. You don't need to comment, do you? Because you can see them right there. Now,
the household's credibility on its own crowd-drawing framing is now operationally non-existent. The structural contrast with Princess Catherine's Italian engagement the previous week is operationally direct. Catherine attended Reggio Emilia for early learning research and produced an engagement that crowds travelled 3 hours to attend. The audience response was substantial enough that the Meghan's Mole independent commentary platform placed the side-by-side comparison on the documentary record without analytical commentary. The visual comparison performs the analytical work. Catherine produces crowds. Meghan produces empty streets at a bus stop. The structural meaning is that the underlying audience attention asset that the Sussex household has been monetizing across the past 6 years has now operationally depleted to the level at which substantive international appearances generate operationally no crowd response. The asset is no longer available at the scale the household's commercial pipeline requires. The Brittany structural reading on the underlying configuration is consequential because it identifies the operational pattern through which the household reached this point.
but there's just one moment at the end, and I want you to watch closely here. She's touching her nose. And I don't know what it's about. I've got some idea of what it's about. And I just want you to watch closely. Let's just give her the benefit of the doubt and think she's trying to do the one tear left eye. She's trying to get some emotion into the end of her speech. But it's curious. Look.
Meghan's commercial value on Brittany's framing derives from her connection to the institutional crown, rather than from her own personal capacity. Prince Philip's documented observation that it is the crown that is the star, not the individual royal, captures the structural framework. When the individual royal departs the institutional position, the audience attention asset depletes with the departure. The royal's personal brand is operationally insufficient to sustain the level of audience engagement the institutional position previously generated. The Sussex household's commercial pipeline has been operating against this depleting asset for 6 years, with each commercial deployment further depleting the underlying institutional connection. The Geneva engagement is the operational illustration of where the asset is now positioned. The institutional connection has been substantially exhausted. The personal brand cannot sustain the audience response the household requires. The Tom Sykes scathing professional analysis is the additional structural element worth presenting. Sykes was physically present in Geneva for the speech and has placed his observations on the public record through the Royals channel. His framing operates at the level of senior royal correspondent professional assessment, rather than at the level of partisan commentary. Sykes's structural reading is that the Geneva engagement was a substantial opportunity for Meghan to position herself as a serious player in international policy advocacy. The opportunity required, in his operational framing, that she be laser-focused on representing herself as a serious person at a senior international forum, addressing substantive policy questions. The opportunity was operationally destroyed by the Mama's Little Helper Instagram post she chose to make in the hours before the speech.
Good. So actually, Nancy said you can sum up this faux humanitarian trip in one meme, and there it is. Her face as she realizes nobody's there for me, but they were all there for Catherine.
Sykes characterizes the post as Exhibit A, in the case that the Sussex household is essentially impossible to advise. He has been told repeatedly by people who have worked with and around the household that the principals do what they want, regardless of professional counsel. The Instagram post is the operational illustration of this advisory failure. The Sykes documentary observation on the photograph itself is operationally precise. The mirror selfie was taken inside a walk-in closet. The image shows Meghan in a lilac coat. Lilibet crouches at her mother's feet in a red outfit, with her back to the camera, her red hair in a ponytail. A man's blazer hangs prominently on a rail to the right. The reflection shows dozens upon dozens of garments packed tightly on rails. Sykes' professional estimate is that close to $250,000 worth of clothing is visible in the single frame. The structural meaning of this composition is operationally direct. The image is, in Sykes' framing, boastful and vain.
There, maybe shining her shoes, but very much part of the merch sheen operation, because at the front of the shot was the Armani dress and black shoes that Meghan would wear to the event. And Cher pointed out, I know for a fact, the lack of a crowd bothered Meghan Markle because she was so insecure, she just had to tell us what designers she would be wearing that day.
It captures the dressing room of a figure operating at the highest level of consumer luxury display. Sykes' analytical observation is that in the context of an international aid community operating under enormous pressure with budgets being cut and jobs being lost, the image of a duchess in a lilac designer coat in her palatial Montecito dressing room is operationally indefensible against the substantive content of the speech she was about to deliver. The Sykes structural observation on the disappearance of Prince Archie from recent Sussex household content is the further analytical element worth presenting. Lilibet, at 4, does not yet have the operational capacity to express meaningful preferences about whether her image is broadcast to millions of strangers. Archie, at 7, has reached the developmental stage at which such preferences may be operationally articulated. The structural pattern Sykes identifies is that Archie has been increasingly absent from Sussex household content drops across recent months. His sister continues to feature regularly. The structural inference Sykes offers is that the older child may have begun to express reluctance about continued exposure, and that the household has therefore shifted its commercial deployment to the younger child who cannot yet articulate similar resistance. The structural meaning is consequential because it operationally captures the underlying ethical configuration. A 4-year-old cannot meaningfully consent to image broadcast to millions of strangers. The argument that the Sussex household has been making across multiple public relations engagements, that the household protects the children's privacy by not showing their faces, fails the test that not showing the face does not prevent the child from becoming a social media star. The curiosity gap the partial obscuring generates operates as the engagement mechanism rather than as the protective mechanism. The psych's professional conclusion is operationally direct.
In Geneva, and I've got to give you a little bit of context for this. She's doing this with the World Health Organization boss, Dr. Tedros. Now, Dr. Tedros, and I'm not going to go into it, I'm not going to bore you with it, okay? You can look at my other videos back in COVID days. Dr. Tedros is a very bad man. One of the worst men in the world.
The Sussex household has squandered every last drop of goodwill that would have been required to operate as effective advocates for children's digital safety. The squandering has been executed through precisely the kind of stunt the Mama's Little Helper Instagram post represents. The structural meaning is that the operational space within which Meghan could have positioned herself as a substantive policy advocate has now been operationally closed by the cumulative pattern of her own decisions. The Geneva engagement could have operated as the foundation for a sustained advocacy career on a substantive subject. The Instagram post operated as the disqualifying counter-evidence that the audience, the media, and the professional advocacy community can all read against the speech's claimed substantive content. The Mama's Little Helper Instagram post that preceded the Geneva engagement is the structural illustration of how the household is now operating against its own stated framings.
And the speech began with Meghan standing in front of that lost screen memorial, with virtually no one behind her apart from those few passers-by, and she began by thanking Dr. Tedros.
Thank you for being here this evening, and thank you, Dr. Tedros, not simply for your leadership at the World Health Organization, but for your clarity in recognizing that this is not...
The Instagram post featured a mirror selfie of Meghan with Princess Lilibet positioned in the frame, with the caption framing the child as the operational helper to the parents' commercial activities. The Independent Commentary Network has now identified the operational mechanism through which this post was calibrated. The Armani dress and the black shoes Meghan would wear to the Geneva speech were positioned at the front of the frame. The structural meaning is that the post was operationally a merchandising deployment. The child's presence in the frame operated as the audience attention trigger, drawing engagement to the post. The clothing items positioned in the frame operated as the commercial deliverable, with the engagement subsequently directed toward the items themselves. The Sussex household has now operationally converted the parent-child relationship into a promotional vehicle for the commercial merchandise the household is monetizing. The structural offense of this configuration is consequential because the Geneva speech itself was delivered on the subject of online harms to children.
That he presented Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, with a World Health Organization field vest as a gesture of his regard for her commitment to promoting and protecting people's health. Seriously? These two are living in a parallel universe, a universe of delusion. And this is again another example of Meghan trying to cosplay Diana.
The substantive content of the speech included framings on how digital spaces affect young people and on the operational obligations of platforms to protect minors from algorithmic harm. The speech was delivered on this framing with the underlying premise that the speaker is concerned about the impact of digital exposure on children. The operational reality is that the speaker has, immediately before delivering the speech, used her own 4-year-old daughter as a promotional vehicle for the merchandise she was about to wear at the speech. The structural inconsistency between the public framing and the operational behavior is operationally indefensible. The audience reading both elements simultaneously reaches the conclusion that the public framing is the strategic positioning rather than the substantive belief.
At absolutely any cost. Relentless algorithms, exploitative engagement, and endless exposure to harmful content that they are not seeking out.
I guess 4-year-old Lily didn't seek out her starring role in selling Meghan's outfit either, did she?
The Tedros World Health Organization context Wotton develops is the structural element worth presenting because it captures the operational character of the institutional partnership the Sussex household has selected. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the WHO Director General, is the only non-governmental organization head of substantive international standing who has been operationally willing to lend his organization's credibility to the Sussex household's commercial public relations activity. The structural feature of this configuration is that the WHO is, in its substantive mission, supposed to be operating on questions of pandemic preparedness, infectious disease management, and health system strengthening across global populations. Social media engagement for children is not, on any ordinary reading of the WHO's substantive mission, the operational priority that the organization should be deploying its institutional capital on. The Tedros decision to position the WHO behind the Sussex household's online harms framing is, on Wotton's analytical framing, operationally questionable. The structural meaning is that the partnership reflects a level of institutional desperation on both sides. The Sussex household requires senior institutional cover that mainstream institutions no longer extend. The WHO, under Tedros's leadership, has reached an operational position at which the institutional capital is being deployed on engagement registers that fall substantially outside the organization's substantive mission. The Tedros decision to present Meghan with a WHO field vest as a gesture of his regard for her commitment to promoting and protecting people's health is the operational illustration of the symbolic exchange the partnership is producing. The Good Morning America coverage decision that Wotton develops on the broadcast is the structural illustration of how American mainstream media is now operationally responding to Sussex household engagements.
Experience, court cases, authoritative medical and media journals, and testimony from families, a clear and urgent picture is emerging. At the same time, advancing technologies such as AI are not just repeating past mistakes, they are accelerating and amplifying them. The risks are compounding. We are seeing new forms of harms emerge faster than our systems and ourselves are prepared to respond.
ABC News, which operates Good Morning America, did not produce coverage of the Geneva speech itself. The substantive policy engagement, the Tedros partnership, the World Health Organization context, and the broader institutional framing the speech was calibrated to generate were not the content the network's coverage selected. The network's coverage was instead a story headline that Meghan Markle is giving fans another rare look at life with daughter Princess Lily, drawing on the Mama's Little Helper Instagram post. The structural meaning is that even Sussex-friendly American mainstream media has now reached the operational position that the substantive policy engagement is not commercially viable coverage, while the child-focused Instagram content remains audience engaging. The household's strategic pivot to children-focused commercial deployment is therefore not just the household's preference. It is the operational requirement that the broader media ecosystem has imposed by responding only to the children-focused content. The pay-to-play structural framework Brittany develops is consequential for understanding how the Geneva engagement came to be operationally arranged in the first place.
Clashing. Even Tom Sykes, who was there, by the way, he was in Geneva for this speech, has been utterly scathing, asking how she does not see the problem in her hypocrisy.
The household's public relations operation has, on Brittany's professional reading, reached the operational position at which Meghan is not being invited to most of the events at which she appears. The standard mechanism through which she now attends is that the household's public relations agency pays the conference organizers, who in turn book her as an attendee. The structural feature of this arrangement is that it inverts the standard celebrity engagement framework. Genuine celebrity engagement operates on the basis that the conference receives commercial value from the celebrity's attendance, with the celebrity therefore being compensated for the attendance. The Sussex configuration operates in reverse. The household pays the conference, with the conference receiving operational benefit in the form of the additional payment, and the celebrity receives the engagement opportunity that her commercial position would otherwise no longer allow her to access. The structural meaning is that the Geneva engagement, like many of the Sussex household's recent international appearances, is not the operational endorsement that the framing suggests. It is the commercial purchase of access to a platform that the household's contracting reputation no longer enables it to obtain through ordinary professional channels. The Britney structural framing on Meghan's addiction to social media is the additional analytical element worth presenting. Meghan, on this reading, is operationally addicted to the engagement that social media platforms generate. She loves social media. She loves the digital ecosystem within which her engagement operates. The structural problem with this disposition is that the internet does not love her back in the register her addiction requires. The internet engagement she receives is disproportionately critical rather than affirming. Her operational response is therefore to attempt to change the internet to better accommodate her preferences. The Geneva speech, framed as a policy intervention on online harms, is, in this reading, the operational expression of Meghan's attempt to restructure the digital ecosystem in ways that would produce more favorable engagement for figures like her. The structural meaning is that the policy substance of the speech is operationally calibrated for personal benefit rather than for the substantive interest of the affected children. The audience reading the speech against the documentary record of Meghan's own social media use can read the calibration. The Britney structural reading on what Meghan would have to do to demonstrate substantive commitment to the cause the Geneva speech engaged with is consequential. The operational test would be to stop posting her own children to the social media platforms she is critiquing. The structural test is operationally simple. If the platforms are dangerous for children, the parent who claims to care about that danger should not be exposing her own children to those platforms. The Sussex household's continued deployment of Archie and Lilibet across Instagram, in commercial productions, and through the broader public relations apparatus operates as the operational disconfirmation of the speech's claimed substantive concern.
This single frame, I could be wrong, it could be more. It is a boastful image. It is a vain image. And given what she is doing at this event, it is a staggeringly tone-deaf image.
The structural meaning is that the speech operates at the level of public relations positioning rather than at the level of substantive engagement. And the operational test for distinguishing the two is the parent's own behavioral choices regarding the children. The policy framework is supposed to protect. The Charlie XCX counterfactual that Wootton develops is the structural illustration of what genuine celebrity drawing power produces. Wootton's professional observation is that placing Charlie XCX, Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, or any A-list celebrity at the same Geneva location would have produced tens of thousands of attendees within minutes. The structural mechanism is that genuine celebrity drawing power operates through audience networks that respond to surprise appearances by figures audiences are operationally invested in. The Sussex household's Geneva appearance, with extensive advance promotion through the household's media channels, generated essentially no audience response. The structural meaning is that the contrast is not between the Sussex household and major A-list celebrities. It is between the Sussex household's framing of its own drawing power and the operational reality. The framing has been calibrated to suggest A-list drawing power. The operational reality is at a level that even moderate celebrity drawing power would substantially exceed. The Geneva failure is therefore not just a measure of the household's contracting position, it is a measure of how operationally distant the household's framing has drifted from the underlying reality. The Britney structural framing on the household's irrelevance to the international ecosphere is consequential. Meghan, in her middle-aged position, is now operating against the structural feature that public attention spans across generations rotate through the available cultural figures. The cultural attention that the household commanded during the 2018 wedding period has not been sustained at the level the household's continuing commercial framework requires. The next generation of cultural figures has emerged, and the audience attention has rotated to those figures. The Sussex household is now competing for residual attention against a substantially larger field of younger cultural figures whose operational positioning is closer to the audience interest the household has historically depended on. The structural meaning is that the household's contracting position is not just the function of its own operational difficulties. It is also the function of the broader cultural attention economy moving operationally past the household's particular celebrity register. The closing observation is that the Geneva empty streets, the Mama's Little Helper merch deployment, the Good Morning America coverage decision, the pay-to-play attendance framework, the Britney addiction reading, the Prince Philip Crown framework, the Charlie XCX counterfactual, and the cultural attention rotation are facets of the same broader structural configuration. The Sussex household has operationally exhausted the audience attention asset that its commercial pipeline has been monetizing. The institutional connection that sustained the asset is no longer available at the level the household requires. The personal brand cannot sustain the engagement the institutional brand previously produced. The strategic pivot to children-focused content operates as the household's attempt to recover engagement through a different mechanism, but the broader cultural ecosystem has now consolidated against the household's underlying framing. The audience reads the cumulative pattern accurately. The institutional response continues to operate through the let them doctrine. The commercial pipeline continues to contract. The cumulative documentary record continues to expand. The mathematics continue to work through the household's documented financial trajectory. The runway on the Wakeford analysis remains at approximately 5 years against the current burn rate. Within that window, the operational pressure will continue to intensify, the commercial pathways will continue to contract, and the cultural permission will continue to deplete at the level the Geneva failure has now documented. The verdict is in. The mathematics will continue to work through. The Sussex contribution to the same news cycle will continue to operate as the operational illustration of what the cultural attention contraction produces when the underlying asset on which the household's commercial position depended has now substantially depleted to the level the Geneva empty streets have made structurally visible.